If you already like the current Gold Paladin deck, then you're going to love this one.
Stand up! Vanguard!
Hey Cardfighters, welcome back to another deck profile video, and it's about time that we're going to cover all these new decks that we can build with Miyaji Academy Cardfight Club. And there are a lot to go over. I have currently 9 builds ready, so there's 9 videos that's coming your way. We have 1 for Golds, we have 1 for Narukami, we have 2 for Nubatama, we have 2 for Royal Paladin, we have 3 for Oracle Think Tank. And I'm probably forgetting something, but we're going to get to all those different builds. So without further ado, let's jump right into this Gold Paladin deck profile. It's the upgraded version that we already seen with the ultra rare set. So if you haven't seen the deck profile first, then links on top. I highly recommend you to go watch that first, because I'm not going to go over some details that I already explained in that one. So if you don't understand what I'm referring to, or I'm skipping some information, then I probably already addressed it in that video. So that's probably a tip to either watch it before this one, or after you're done with this one, you can then watch that one. But for those who don't know, Gold Paladin is basically a deck that focuses entirely about multi-attacking from the hand, and in most cases multi-attacking after the damage step is done. So after your opponent already has taken a damage, so you know if you're hitting into a defensive trigger or not. And that is the strong point of Gold Paladin, and that's what we're going to see with this build. And they also excel in superior riding towards Ezel, and now with the new one, the Raven Ezel, you can go even beyond that and even stronger. So let's jump right into this deck profile and see what this deck can do and what cards you're probably gonna run or not. So yeah, take it away. Alright, for this Gold Paladin deck profile, we run a total of 10 grade 3s, 11 grade 2s, 12 grade 1s, and 17 grade 0s. For a specific deck list, we run a total of 4 copies of Incandescent Lion Blonde Ezel, and that's the obvious choice, as seen as most of our cards are going to accelerate towards this grade 3, so we want to run as much copies as we can of this specific Ezel. We also run 4 copies of Ravenair Ezel, and this is the next level version of Ezel, and this one allows us to have some high aggressive plays in the early game to push our opponent to 4 or 5 damage, so we can go back into Blonde Ezel and then finish them off with multiple attacks where they cannot rely on defensive triggers, as seen as they probably are at 5 damage. And for supporting grade 3, we run 2 copies of Battlestorm Sacramore, and we run this card as seen as she is amazing to extend our combos, as she allows us to chain more attacks for basically free of cost, as we draw a card and then call a card. This is just a perfect card to extend more attacks during mid-battle superior calling. For grade 2s, we run 4 copies of Flamewind Lion Wonder Ezel. This is the new grade 2 that allows us to superior ride into Blonde Ezel, and together with Balmains we have 8 cards with their grade 1 copy cards. We have basically 2 ways to superior ride, and this card also allows us to multi-attack by chaining more attacks. When we call this thing, we can call another thing. So it's a very good card that we can use in multiple ways, and it allows us to basically do what we need to do with this deck even more consistently. We also, of course, run 4 copies of Knight of Superior Skill Balmains. Just like the old deck profile, we run him to have more possibility of superior ride into Ezel as early as possible, but it also is a good beat stick when we need to, and it can also fetch out the Gareth mid-battle, so we can have more attacks when we need to. Lastly, of the grade 2s, we run 3 copies of Knight of Exhaustion's Azarus, and this is basically the free version of Vivian, as seen as it doesn't cost Counterblast Soul Blast, but it does cost us a card from hand. But as seen as we already are using resources for other skills, we are using this card in this deck profile, as seen as it allows us to tag in more superior call effects and more chaining effects without sacrificing even more resources that are very limited in Gold Paladin. For grade 1s, we run 4 copies of Crimson Lion Beast of Well. This one is the grade 1 that combines with Wonder Ezel, so that's why we run it, but it also has an amazing skill that allows us to multi-attack as superior call after the defense step, after the guard step calculation, so we know if they got a trigger or not, so we have more precise precise way of attacking our opponents when they are the most vulnerable. And it also goes in the soul, so it fixes a little bit of the soul issue that we have in Gold Paladin. For the other grade ones, we run, of course, 4 copies of Knight of Elegance Skill Gareth. This one is the combo card with Balmains, and that's the main reason why we run it. But it also is a nice 18k or 28k beat stick when we call it and use its skill on the Ezel Circle, for example. So it's still a very decent card, and it allows us to deck Finn with Balmains, so that's also a nice bonus effect. And lastly, we run 4 copies of Listener of Truth Didrin, and we run her, of course, for the counter charge, but also with now more soul options, we can also use her maybe to draw more cards, so we have a bigger hand to superior call better cards. But with how the new deck works, we can finally use her more consistently. We can get more soul blasting out of her to either get her to a more powerful attacker or a great way to sustain our resources. So she is now even better than she was in the old Gold Paladin deck. For grade zeros, we of course run the obvious starter that is Crimson Lion Cup Criv. And for the trigger lineup, we still run the same 8 fronts, 4 crit and 4 draw PGs. So we don't run any heals, and it's for the same reason we did in the previous Gold Paladin Ezel deck. And actually even more so than it was then, as seen as we are more aggressive, we have more superior calling capabilities, we have a more consistent superior right effect, and the way that Ravenhair Ezel allows us to push our opponent to high damage even faster than we did in that deck, it's even more likely that our heal triggers aren't going to do anything, so it's even more a given to don't run any heals in this deck. But of course, you can still tag them in if you want to. So that makes a total of 10 grade 3s, 11 grade 2s, 12 grade 1s, and 17 grade 0s. The power from Gold Paladin comes from the fact that we can superior call new units, but more importantly, doing that during the battle phase. We got combo extenders and combo starters. Starters are cards that allows us to call unit to the field during the battle phase. Ezel can do that before the Vanguard battle, and Hoel can do that after he boosted. Combo extenders are cards that allows us to keep chaining in new cards that are cards like Sakromor, Wonder Ezel, and Ezreus. In the last Gold Paladin video, I showcased an insane 12 attack combo that could happen in an ideal scenario. However, with this deck, we can get that amount of attacks much easier for even less cost. And if luck is on your side, you can even go beyond that and attack for 15 to 20 times. But instead me showcasing an unlikely scenario, I'm going to show you a real life example. Future Mr. Time Leap, go right ahead. Alright, so what we're looking at is a filled field and ready to attack our opponent with some insane amount of numbers of attacks. So to clarify, what you're looking at is we filled out the field with all our superior calling skills and just placing cards from hand. And the 3 Ezel circles are possible because we superior ridden into Blonde Ezel and then immediately into Ravenhair Ezel. So that's why the first 2 came. And that was last turn. And this turn we ridden once again into Blonde Ezel. So that's where the 3rd circle is coming from. Then we basically filled out the field. These cards are no particular that needs to be on the field, but the more cards are on the field in the first wave of attacks, the more attacks you get basically for free, as they don't cost any counterblast or soul blast. The only actual important part about this combo is that you have these 2 Hoels in the back row able to boost something so you can activate their skills. And you have at least 2 Sakromors in hand so you can keep chaining more attacks. In this example we have 4 cards. The other 2 don't really matter for that much. But the more you have of Wonder Ezel and Ezreus, and maybe Sakromors will help extending the combo more. To showcase that this is a completely live combo, I'm going to shuffle the deck once again, so there is no stacking of the deck. I don't know what's going to happen. And I'm going to showcase on the screen the number of attacks each time I'm going to attack, which number it is, and how strong it is, so you can see how many attacks I can unleash against my opponent. Also for this example, I'm not going to use Blonde Ezel's skill to superior call. You can do that, and depending on the scenarios, you can chain all different kind of things. And I'm going to go over that in the editor I did this example. But the Hoel is a little bit different, but also better in the case that you draw one, and it's after the defense step, as you can see if they got a defensive trigger or not. So we start attacking, of course, with the Ezel circles, as we can then superior call on top of those. So I go right ahead with basically the weakest, of course. So 18 for this attack, 22 for this attack, 22 for this attack. So it's already 3 attacks in. Then we attack with one of these columns. So let's say we're gonna do this one. This is 15k onto our opponent, as let's say that this one didn't use her skill. So after end of the battle, I'm gonna use this Hoel skill. So counterblast 1, put this one into the soul. I draw one.
And then I superior call one Sycamore. I'm gonna call it on top of one of the Ezel circles. Then I'm gonna use Sycamore skill. I'm gonna Soul Blast the Hovel that I just Soul Charged. I draw another card. And then I will superior call another card from my hand. In this case, I'm gonna call Wonder Ezel. Then Wonder Ezel skill triggers. I can call another card from my hand. And let's say I will call this Gareth. So now I have another 3 attacks ready to attack once again. So this is another 18, this is another 19, and this is another 22. Then I can attack with this column. So I will attack with this wave. So this is 17. Then at the end of that I use that skill. I counterblast 1. Put this one into the soul. I draw 1. And then I will call a card from my hand. This time I will call another Sycamore. Then I will use Sycamore skill. Soul Blast. Draw 1. And look at that. I top deck the Wonder Ezel. So that means I can call this on top of this Ezel. And then I call another card from my hand to the field. And I will say I will call... called Dungal. So that was the field. Now, as soon as this is probably my last attack for this turn, I can still, if my opponent's at 6 damage, I only have 5 damage, I only have 2 cards left. After 2 I will have 4. I can go nuts and decide to attack first with this one and then use Ezel skill to call the Hoel. But let's do a little bit safer route and just go with the Vanguard. I'm not going to use the skills, it's another 12. I'm going to drive check, a Wonder Ezel, and a draw trigger. So I will give the power to, let's say, to a Sycamore. And I draw another card. So then I will attack for 15, another 19, and then for 32. And if I'm correct, that was about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12, 13 attacks. That basically only cost me 2 counterblasts. I started the turn with 5 cards, with 4 cards. I end with 5 cards. And don't forget, 2 of those 4 cards were grade 3. So I didn't lose defense value on my hand for that. And also the amount of soul is still the same. The cards that I soul blasted were the 2 Wonder Ezel, the 2 Hoels that I put into the soul with the skills. So it actually only cost me 2 counterblasts. But other things you can do is, let's say for example you only have 1 counterblast open. And you have a Didrin to your disposal. You can basically then choose to do the first wave attacks, then attack with the Vanguard and call Sycamore. And then with the Sycamore you can either chain a Wonder Ezel, and then as the last you can call Didrin. And with Didrin you can Soul Blast, and then basically that 1 counter blast you can flip it open once again, and then can keep chaining. So in this example I use 2 open counter blasts, but if you use a Didrin at the right timing, you can also do it with only 1 counterblast. And there are many other different things that you can do, so try searching for different options, different multi-attacking options. And as you can see, my first draws weren't really that great, but right on timing, I top decked the Wonder Ezel to get that extra free attack. And you could possibly even chain further, that you can go here 1, here 1, here 1, then here 1, and here 1. So with 1 wave you can replenish 5 different units in the front row. I took it a little bit safe route and showcased that I can only fill the front row 3 circles in the Exels. But even though, that's still 13 attacks if I'm correct, and that's pretty amazing. So with that, I conclude this demonstration. So back to you, past Mr. Time Leap.
Alright, now that we know what kind of crazy things we can do, let's see how we can manage this. And as you might have noticed, we didn't use a lot of Counterblast and a lot of Soul Blast. And the reason for that is because this deck doesn't use Counterblast and Soul Blast a lot at all. We Soul Blast only once with Ezel or Wonder Ezel if we get the superior right off. And besides that, we only have 2 Sycamores and 4 Didrians that use the Soul Blast. And as soon as we superior right with Ravenhair and Hoel goes into the Soul, it's quite clear that Soul won't be an issue. Counterblast can become a problem because of Ravenhair can use 2 Counterblasts in 1 turn. But if you don't go nuts in that card, you can have more than enough counterblast to spare for Hoel, and possibly even Gareth. Don't forget we have Didrins that help us turning Soul into counterblast. In fact, you can make the superior right from Ravenhair free, as soon as you can use the counterblast to right, so you add a card to your Soul, and Didrin uses Soul to turn it into a counterblast and she gets plus 3k power. This deck, like any Gold Paladin deck, still has the problem that it plays with a low hand size, and because of Wonder Ezel and Azurus forces you to minus on hand, make this even more apparent. So always keep track of the amount of cards and what type of cards you are in hand to make the right decisions. Deck strategies are relatively the same as the older version of the deck. Right off the gate, you want to push your opponent to 5 damage to get the most out of your multi-attacking. This is now more possible with the upgrade to Ravenhair and the extra superior right chain. Thanks to Wonder Ezel and Howell, going into Ezel on turn 2 is more likely than ever before. Also going into Ravenhair in the same turn can push for high damage very quickly. That's why you want to try to mulligan your hand for a position where you can superior right into Ezel and immediately into Ravenhair Ezel to get your twin drive and 2 Ezel circles ready. If they give you 2 damage, well, then you use your crit skill to push them even to either 4 or 5 damage or destroy their hand. Try to rely more on Howell than Blonde Ezel to start your multi-attacking, because Blonde Ezel has the downside that you call before you dealt any damage, meaning you might just call the unit for nothing and minus on your hand with no upside to it. Howell doesn't have this problem. As seen as most cards in this deck are just 9k, meaning on an Ezel circle they are 19k, and that in fact will translate to that if they get any defensive trigger, will result in the ending of your turn and probably game over. Also, Howell doesn't minus you on hand as soon as you get a new draw from it. Speaking of drawing cards, like Sakurmore and Howell have the upside that you can draw and call new cards. When your opponent gets a defensive trigger, you would normally stop calling cards from your hand as you are actively minusing on hand. But in the case where you have some open circles, it might be smart just to use their skill if you have a low guard option. Why? Well, if you have Sakurmore and a grade 2 in hand, you can use Howell's skill to draw and call the Sakurmore. Because it's a grade 3, you lose 0 shield from hand. Then you use Sakurmore's skill to draw and call a grade 2 to the field. As long as you don't call over another grade 2 interceptor, you also didn't lose shield value. And as seen as a 5k in hand as well as a field. However, you just draw 2 new cards. That can give you potentially 30k shield. If it was 2 triggers, maybe even a PG. It might not seem logical to do, but if it allows you to survive till next turn, then this might have been the most powerful play you did during this game. Usually I would go over the other options for this deck, but how this deck is built, you can't really fit anything in. Some would argue, well, Mach/Dragon is a great card, but you can't swap it for Sakurmore because then you would have a counterblast issue. Also, it doesn't allow you to chain more cards, it's a combo starter, not an extender. You could also say change Azurus in Vivian, and you might be right as seen as they work very similar, but again, you might save cards in hand, but it costs a counterblast as well as a soul blast, so it might limit your combo potential. Of course, you can run only one of the superior right chain, but this Ezel deck is all about consistency. The moment you remove some cards, you would have to build this deck from the ground up. The only thing that you could play with is the trigger lineup. You can add maybe some draws or heals. I personally will stick with the standpoint that it's a super aggro deck that outtempo any deck in the current format, so heals shouldn't go off as seen as you should have less damage than they, and this is even more true so than the last Ezel deck profile thanks to the new support. This new Gold Paladin deck is an extremely aggro deck that tries to outtempo your opponent by going to Ezel at tier 2 and possibly even Ravenhair. And during the latter stages of the game, it will bombard them with insane amount of multi-attacking. The deck is an extreme glass cannon as it cannot deal with any form of pressure or control as seen as they don't have a lot of tools to defend themselves. However, that won't be necessary as seen as most of their opponents are probably dead before they even can begin. And with that we conclude this Gold Paladin deck profile for Ezel. And as I stated before, I didn't go in depth in most cases as seen as I probably already discussed it in the previous Gold Paladin deck profile. So if you haven't seen that one, again, check that video out. And otherwise, yeah, it's a very insane deck that is very aggressive. It can, it's a little bit glass cannon in the sense that if you cannot get your superior right off and get the edge early game, then it might be very difficult to fight your way out of it after that point, as seen as a lot of your grade 2s or 9Ks. But if you like this aggressive kind of playstyle with a little bit of chance and basically luck factor in, but it's something that when it goes off, it pays out a lot, it gives a great feeling, but you need to accept the fact that it will not always happen, and in the case that it doesn't happen, you probably are about to lose the game. But let's make this deck very fun, in my personal opinion, a very fun deck to play indeed. And yeah, let me know in the comments down below what you guys think about the deck profile, Gold Paladin in general, and how you are probably going to build the deck, because there are a lot of different ways that you can build it in your own kind of playstyle. I've seen people talking about if they can make a Paladin or Garmor kind of ish deck, or more focus around the other cards than Ezel in particular. So I'm very curious what you guys think and what approach you're going to take to this new Gold Paladin set. Now that we basically got two half sets of support that are finally one big one. But if you're curious about any other deck profile of this set, then why not subscribe to the channel and hit the bell button down below, as we're going to cover all the new decks that you can build with Miyaji Academy in the upcoming days, weeks, depending how long it's gonna take to edit all those videos. As I said before, there are 9 videos, so that will take a long time. But if you're curious in any of those deck profiles, then definitely check back in the channel when those videos are gonna go up in the upcoming days. But as always, guys, I'm Mr. Time Leap, and I'll see you guys in the next one.